Welcome to the Literature Lounge, where writers and authors share their stories behind their stories.
Sweet malida, a mix of water softened, flattened rice, sugar, dried fruits, and nuts, was a dish made for Shabbat or for breaking our fast. Cooling, light on the palate and to the body and spirit, it was welcome in the heat of day or night. We had many foods in common with our Muslim, Christian, and Hindu neighbors, and we often celebrated together their festivals or ours. I relished particularly fresh coconut, the regional staple, its milk or its flesh.
Tell me a little bit about what does food mean to you, spiritually, culturally? What is the meaning of that in the Bene Israel dishes that you talk a lot about?
So there's a lot connected with tradition, with all of us, without our mothers and grandmothers who fed us and cooked for us, and we never thanked them for it, They were always taken for granted. So in many ways, this is a way of bringing them to life and saying, I'm here because of you. I'm here because of your food. I'm here because you nurtured me, in every way. So in a way, all of that came together in this book. So I meet with Jamaican Jews, I meet with African Jews, and there are groups called Jews of Color, and they've invited me to come and speak because they didn't know about Indian. So we talk about how Jamaican Jews, how Uganda and Ethiopian Jews are some of the, like us, one of the most ancient communities. So part of what I do when I go and talk is saying, peel those layers back. There are ancient communities, way more ancient than the European ones.
Hi, in today's episode, we have with us Zilka Joseph, a poet and author whose work bridges Indian and Western cultures, reflecting her Bene Israel Jewish heritage. Born in Mumbai and raised in Kolkata, she now lives in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Her poetry has appeared in renowned journals such as Poetry, Kenyan Review Online, and Michigan Quarterly Review, and in anthologies like 101 Jewish Poems for the Third Millennium. She has received numerous accolades, including multiple Pushcart nominations, a Zell Fellowship, and a Forward Indies Book Award finalist recognition for her collections, including Shark Blue, Search of Flame, and In Our Beautiful Bones. Her latest book, Sweet Malida, Memories of a Bene Israel Woman, celebrates history, food, and traditions of her community. Zilka is also a creative writer, teacher, editor, and a mentor. Her book is Sweet Malida, Memories of a Bene Israel Woman, and I was reading about her, and I'm overwhelmed to have her on our podcast today. So, welcome, Zilka. So, first, let's just straightway dive in into Sweet Melida, which is a very rich and evocative collection. I was reading the poetry, and obviously there is nostalgia. There
Mhm.
is a sense of belonging. So tell us a little bit about the tone and about what inspired you to write the book. Was that a feeling of wanting to belong, a sense of feeling, distorted from the past? Was it all of that and more?
Yes. Thank you, Mohua, for having me. I'm just so honored to be here and to speak with you, and speak with you particularly about this book, which is my sixth collection, and which is my first book that has been published in India. So that's very meaningful to me. So, talking about how the book began, uh, the way a book is, you don't just sit down and write a book. You are writing various pieces, various poems, putting them into folders, collecting them. And then once you start looking at them, you realize how you can pull these different themes into a book. So a lot of craft, a lot of um, deep thought goes into actually creating a book. A book is just written. It's written in various stages. There are various themes that you pull together. But this book began in a very interesting way because, as you can tell from the book, that I love food. I love researching food. I love reading about food. And I love the stories connected with food. I think that's so basic to any of us who are creative people or writers or people just connected with the world around us. So I actually had a collection of poems about several Ben Israel dishes, and it was published by a very interesting journal. It's called Rasa, or Rasa, if you want to put it that way, which is an imprint of Whetstone magazine. which has a great reputation. Stephen Satterfield, who made that documentary High on the Hog. So I was extremely thrilled when they said we are putting out a new imprint and we'd like this whole section on Ben Israel food. And then I wrote a little introduction. I wrote a little introduction to that book. I'm sorry, the poems. So then that gave context. And then I realized from there, I began putting together. Of course, I knew the history, but then to get the exact dates and the exact times of different aspects, then I started putting together more and more work and more poems. I had short prose poems, and that's how the book began
Oh, it's
and got its
beautiful.
initial scaffolding.
Yeah. So, just for our readers, I think I want to read Sweet Melida.
I would love to. I would
Yeah.
love to. So that is the title of the book, and this is the book where the artwork was also created by a Ben Israel artist and friend.
I would love to read Sweet Melida, and I'm going to ask you to read another one.
Sure, I would love to. I would love to. So, Malida is the name of the dish. I've just called it Sweet Malida because that sort of sets the tone for the essence of the book. Sweet Malida, a mix of water softened, flattened rice, sugar, dried fruits, and nuts, was a dish made for Shabbat or for breaking our fasts. Cooling, light on the palate and to the body and spirit, it was welcome in the heat of day or night. We had many foods in common with our Muslim, Christian, and Hindu neighbors, and we often celebrated together their festivals or ours. I relished particularly fresh coconut, the regional staple, its milk or its flesh added to almost every dish. But this was to me the best way to eat it, finely grated by my mother's hands, left unsweetened and sprinkled haphazardly on the malida, juicy threads with a fleck of stubborn brown kernel here and there, that sometimes crunched in your teeth like sand, and you winced and swallowed it, knowing there was no simpler or purer or truer form than that.
Oh, that's beautiful. I read that, and I was just so totally in love, and I would really like to read also another one of your poems. The other one that is called "The Angels of Konkan."
Konkan, yes. I will definitely read that because that absolutely is a little glimpse into the history and mythology. So I'm very, very happy to read that for you and for the audience because this is where the shipwreck of my ancestors on the coast, Konkan coast, and then this is a creative rendering of what might have occurred, and then the sense of gratitude. The Angels of Konkan. And this town, this village actually exists, the cemetery exists. The Angels of Konkan. Navgaon, Maharashtra is where it is believed the ancestors of the Ben Israel were shipwrecked and where a ruined cemetery exists today. From tumbled sands and shattered bark, blurred shadows dragged us. Where were we? They dried our battered bodies, bound our wounds, clothed us in woven cotton, fed us warm food with their hands that we could not name then. And as Elijah ate of bread and flesh that ravens gave him, so also we ate and drank of the cool water brought from brooks. Who were these healers? Then, in fields of grass near the sea, we buried our dead, the ones we found. Where are they now? Set gravestones to remember. They let us pray as we wished, and giving thanks to Adonai, we learned the craft of oil pressers. Or did our tribe know it already? Ate what our laws permitted, and praising this vast green land, its rich soil, its rivers, its ghats, its grains, its fish and fowl. We bless the hearts and the living hands of the villagers who saved us.
Oh my God, that is so profound. It is so beautiful. You also open your book with an essay that's titled What's in My Bones, which introduced the Bene Israel community's history, right? And me, for the first time, I was actually reading up about it and I did not know. And obviously, this had a huge influence in your life. So, could you share some of the history, for our listeners, how it shaped you personally and, of course, creatively?
Yes, of course. So that essay that's published in the book was actually published on the Jewish Book Council's website. They have a section called Paper Brigade Daily. And this was also a way of me introducing the history of my community and then a little glimpse into my background. So it's very brief, and I thought it would make a wonderful, really like brief introduction to who I am and what the book is about. And I think what in the West people almost know nothing about um, the Indian Jewish cultures, or sometimes even the Sephardic or Mizrahi Jewish cultures, because the dominant culture is Ashkenazi. And they sort of focus on their history and their knowledge, and very little is known about this community. Very little is known in India as well now. So I'm hoping that there will be more curiosity and more people will read and understand how much richer this country's culture is because of how much they've embraced every culture. So coming back to your question about what's in my bones, the history of the Ben Israel itself goes back to one of the dates, at least we believe that they arrived is 175 BCE, which puts
Wow.
people into shock because they don't even realize that their arrival was 2000 years ago. And if that's not the deep fabric of this beautiful country, 2000 years before it was India, before Israel, it was some Judea, they were not even named. So that's when we were living in the villages of the Konkan. So that part of it. And then the history of the community is woven in with my own story. So, being born in Bombay, and of course, being influenced early by this our culture. But what I must explain is that my background was not very religious, even though we were immersed in the food and culture and the stories. And my grandmother would read to me, and I was always fascinated with books and mythology and storytelling. And you'll see that culminating in this book in many ways, where I'm bringing in the stories of my childhood, bringing in the stories of my grandfather, grandmother, my parents, my father, who is a marine engineer. So you'll see many of those themes interwoven into this book. And I think so much of the interest in mythology and creative storytelling became part of me as a writer. So I think this book sort of brings together um, history, mythology, my own family history, and most importantly, the theme of migration
Mm.
across generations. So if you start with the boats that were shipwrecked, if you go into the history of my grandparents, my grandfather being in the British Army as a doctor and going to Egypt and Palestine and tending to the soldiers there. My father being a marine engineer, so connection to the sea again. And then my travel from Kolkata to the US and then to a new culture and blending all these cultures. So that's how the layers of the book sort of unfold.
So there's a lot of food, right, which is really the central theme, of your book. And I'm always so sad about the fact that so many recipes are just dying a natural death. and very few people, and I often talk about this, that very few people are cooking any longer at home.
That's true.
And so I remember while I was growing up, all the food that was made at home, and many of those dishes are not cooked any longer because ma doesn't cook anymore after I lost my father. And there are a lot of the ingredients that are not probably available with migration, because we've
Yes.
migrated as Bengalis. So
Yes.
tell me a little bit about what does food mean to you, and spiritually, culturally, what is the meaning of that in a in the Bene Israel dishes that you talk a lot about.
Yeah, as I explained, the book's impetus really was food. And then the story sort of built up around that. And one of the things I've already mentioned is my love of food and my curiosity about, um, I won't say food anthropology exactly, but just how families connect with food and how we take food for granted when we're small. We don't think about it. And then till we lose it, we suddenly realize I don't have my mother now to make the poha for me. I don't have anybody to say, you know, there's this green curry, I made green curry today. I've made so I think so much of that comes with, at least for me, a lot of it came with the loss of my home, loss of my parents, and this sort of desire to bring it all alive, bring them alive, bring these foods alive in a way. And I didn't think I was doing it consciously. Just as a writer, I was drawing on these um, resources of memory and taste and senses, because without senses, writers are nothing. The world is filtered through those senses. And I think it was so intense and so much, um, so intrinsic, that I don't think I even consciously thought about any of that when I was pulling these stories together. It's only when, as an editor, you step back and you're arranging these stories in a very conscious way, that you realize how, um, you're building, you're layering this food and memory and culture. So it really, in a sense, became a memoir in some ways, and became a hybrid form, because I have short prose pieces that I had, and which fit beautifully into this collection. So a lot of that sort of came together, but it began with food and memories of the women in the family making and doing. So
Yeah.
there's a lot connected with tradition, with all of us. Without our mothers and grandmothers who fed us and cooked for us, and we never thanked them for it. They were always taken for granted. So in many ways, this is a way of bringing them to life and saying, you I am here because of you. I'm here because of your food. I'm here because you nurtured me, in every way. So in a way, all of that came together in this book.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Thank
I
you.
need to talk to you a little bit about Prophet Elijah.
Yes.
How does Elijah symbolize to you personally? You've talked about migration, you've talked about
Yes.
different cultures that you've embraced. So how has the identity and the faith of your community, what does it mean to you?
Um, as I mentioned before, my family personally were not religious. We did celebrate certain uh, holidays, like we did Rosh Hashanah, and we had other families that we would celebrate. So they would basically invite us for the feasts, and we would be there to enjoy it and say prayers for Passover and things. My grandmother was a little more conservative, so we did have some prayers and some things. But basically, Shabbat, as you see in the book, is symbolically very important to me. Prophet Elijah again comes to me through storytelling. And if there's stories from the Bible about this dramatic, fiery personality. Again, great storytelling. And how was he connected to the Ben Israel is very interesting, because he lived in the desert, and there was this period of time where God told the ravens to feed him because he was preserving him And then right at the end, he was sent up in this fiery chariot. So that's where the story of the Ben Israel come in, because it is believed that on his way in this fiery chariot up to the heavens, that he actually landed in this little village in the Western Ghats. And the Ben Israel who lived in that area saw him and witnessed it. So it was like a visit, a visitation to them. And there's this rock that exists today. People go on pilgrimages there, where there's this cleft in the rock. It's believed that the wheels of the chariot burned it, or it just ripped the rock apart, and there's this footprint, hoof print of a horse. And again, how mythology and history and storytelling all meld together. So this has become a pilgrimage point, and people go there and actually do Malida ceremonies. So Malida is a dish,
Yes.
but the Thanksgiving ceremony is called the Malida ceremony. So that's how that's connected. I've also heard stories that people who were shipwrecked uh, uh, perhaps saw the prophet Elijah, and they believe that perhaps saved them. But this again is become part of the hearsay and the storytelling. I know for a fact that the rock, the story of the rock, is very much. So you'll find pictures of Prophet Elijah and the rock. For me personally, it was the wonderful story aspect of it, and the fact that these, you know, stories of prophets are always fascinating, because there's a mysticism, there's a mystery, there's an unknown quality about it, which you can interpret in so many ways.
Absolutely.
And the mysticism is something that I'm always been attracted to. So I felt this was a wonderful way to bring in Elijah, bring in the drama of it, and then the drama of him arriving on this rock and leaving. So it just brought the story like full circle. So I thought, as a device in the book, as a conscious craft, I thought it fit in very well with the rest of the storytelling.
What does poetry mean to you, Zilka?
I don't even real know how I was attracted. From childhood, I was attracted to write to poetry, to storytelling, and because so much of it was read to me, and I absorbed it, and I just loved it from the very start without knowing why. And I had no idea that I would be a writer. I had no idea that I would be writing poetry at the serious, deep level, committed level that I write today. I did write poetry as a child, a lot of rhyming, a lot of little fun things. And then in college. So I think I should attribute some of, I should be grateful for some of the opportunities I got there to write poetry, got published in a few local journals. And I don't know if you remember, Moa, there used to be something called the Wall magazine, and I was the editor. I was the literary head. So we would put up people's writing on the board, type it out, print it out, and then type. We should actually type it out. There was no printing or any of that, and then post it on the board. So there'd be poetry section, short stories, art. So when I think back, I think those are the things that probably fed some of my creativity. But in those days, nobody, at least not my family, they were not an academic family, and they encouraged reading, writing, music, all my interests. But I don't think we seriously thought that writing was a profession. Teaching, yes, I went into teaching right away. But it was only much later when I came to the US and I had a lot of time on my hands, and I sort of really began taking these classes and attending things. And then people would say, "My goodness, this is a wonderful poem." I began to study more, and then I got published. I got published before I got into my MFA program. So it's a long, long, many stories, many, many lives together.
Trying to hear that from you in person. And I need to ask you about your book because it's the importance of preserving one's identity, amidst globalization. And, it is a very tough call because there are so many children today who leave their homes, and migration has had a huge impact, right, in the generations ahead.
Right.
So what advice would you give to people who are really striving to hold on to their roots, including me? I try and hold on, and for me it's been like coming back to it with a vengeance. The more older I grow, it's about
Yes.
holding on to
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
feelings, those memories that remind me of home.
Absolutely.
The aroma, the fragrance, the food, all of that. What
Right.
would you tell for youngsters who really are lost sometimes?
Yeah. No, that's a very important question, and truly, as the world opens up more and more, and we're traveling and living in other places, there, for some people, they're comfortable with that. We're always changing, we're reinventing ourselves as we go. For many of us, when we lose our grandparents, we often lose some very deep roots. And I work with women immigrants everywhere, and I work more with older people, and I tell them, please write your stories down so that your children know where they came from, your grandchildren know where they, sometimes languages, they're speaking Kannada, they're speaking Bengali, and the children, grandchildren in the US or the UK or Australia, wherever they are, they don't know their language, which happens. I mean, it's a loss, but that's part of the invention and reinvention as we, the diaspora. But connecting to your roots, and remembering the stories of our ancestors and our grandparents. So writing down these stories just as stories, you don't have to publish them, you don't have to do anything, just put them together. Because I realized when I lost my parents, how much I lost of their stories.
Yeah.
I didn't ask my mother so many stories of Karachi, the Jewish community in Karachi. We were all one big country. Karachi was not Pakistan, right? We were all one. So I realized how much I needed to remember and bring back in whatever form. And of course, memory is always questionable. We're putting it. But so it's not just nostalgia, and it's preservation. And it's preservation in whatever form, whether it's poetry, whether it's prose, mixture of both, but somebody can pick it up and say, I remember the smell. I remember the shape of this puri. I remember my grandmother wearing that sari and, sweating in the kitchen over there. So without those sense memories, and as you said, the aroma, I mean, smell, taste, all of that. So in a way, I did not realize then how much food memory would recreate not just the stories of my family, but the stories of this community. And some other Ben Israel family person may read this and say, "This is not exactly how my mother made this," but that's all right, because each family will have a different tradition. Right, there will
Absolutely.
be different ways. And since we're talking about food, and you said recipes are being lost, I just wanted to mention the novelist Esther David, who, these are models, these are icons of Nissim Ezekiel, Esther David are icons for people like myself. And she has written this book called Bene Appetit, which where she has done research on all the different communities and published the recipes. So I often talk about this in tandem with my book, because people have asked me, why didn't you put recipes into this book? And I said, no, it's a literary form. I didn't want, but people ask me, and if their podcasts or their blogs, then I give them a recipe or two. But I always refer that I have a bibliography at the back, and I mentioned this book by Esther David, where she has collected recipes from the Ben Israel, from the Kochini Jews, from the Baghdadi Jews, and the two newest discoveries. Not so new is the Bene Menashe, and then the last one, I forget, the Andhra Jews. So there's Northeast and Andhra Jews. So
My
it's
God,
very,
amazing, Zilka. I
very.
really did not know. Awesome. Wow, wow, wow. This is
I hope so much, Mohua, you're helping me to create some curiosity. And I want people in India to realize how, there's so much more that's there. And in the West, they know nothing. So when I talk to them, I want them also to be curious, because they can be very dismissive about anything that's not Western. or not European, because East European is the Ashkenazis are basically East European and European Jews. And after the Holocaust, the focus has been on preserving their culture. So I meet with Jamaican Jews, I meet with African Jews, and there are groups called Jews of Color, and they've invited me to come and speak because they didn't know about Indian. So we talk about how Jamaican Jews, how African, Uganda and Ethiopian Jews are some of the, like us, one of the most ancient communities. So part of what I do when I go and talk is saying, peel those layers back. There are ancient communities, way more ancient than the European ones. So I want people to sort of peel back the layers and be curious, embrace, how rich these cultures
Yeah.
are.
Amazing, amazing. So finally, Zilka, what's next for you? Is there any other projects in the pipeline that you'd really like to talk about, exploring the heritage and other facets of your own identity?
Yes, Mo, actually, this is my sixth book, as I mentioned, and all my books are on different subjects, related, of course. There's always the history of my parents, of course, my growing up in Kolkata. So I have a lot of poems that link to all of that. And each book is different, stylistically a little different, and that's what we do as writers, right? We grow, we experiment, we have different forms. So a lot of it is, I do have another manuscript that actually was ready before this one, and I couldn't find a publisher for it, so it was sort of on the back burner. But this one sort of developed, and I had the Mayapple Press, who's also published In Our Beautiful Bones. She loved the book and she published it. And then I managed to get it published through Piparan Books UK. Prabhu Guptara, wonderful man, who supported me, and now Penguin Random House is used brought out the book in India. But yes, I'm hoping that the other book comes through once I'm done with this book. But I'm really working hard, Mohua, and I'm hoping that more colleges and institutions will invite me to speak. I'm doing a round of some of the festivals now, but an exciting book that's in the works is a collaboration with Yael Silliman, who is the Baghdadi Jewish writer from
Yeah,
Calcutta, and a few other
it's
writers.
wonderful.
We're trying to put together an anthology of Indian Jewish women writers.
How wonderful
So
is that? Yael is a very
yeah,
good friend.
just, oh, lovely, lovely.
Yeah, and I just absolutely admire her.
She has done a great deal of work to
Yeah,
preserve history, and she's a historian. I mean,
yes.
I'm delving into history, but more as a creative writer and poet. But she is actually preserving and researching the history, um, and she speaks as a historian rather than and of course she's a writer as well. But she and I and a few other writers that you will hear about very soon, I'm sure. Right now it's in the draft stages, and we're working on the drafts together. So that's a little secret, but an open secret in a way.
Lovely. I'm so
Yeah.
glad to get the secret out of you.
So we're working on that. So that should be, I have no idea because we are still looking for a publisher, and Yal is dealing with that aspect, and I will be helping her also with the editing process as we go. So,
Wonderful. Thank you, Zilka, for taking out the time today to be on our podcast, and all the best. And thank you for
so
taking
honored
the
to be
time
with
for
you
writing
today,
such a
Mahua.
beautiful book. It's
Thank
been
you.
an honor for me too.
Thank you, Mahua.